Hey there.
Everybody.
How's it going?
How's it going?
Fantastic.
Alrighty, well, good evening and welcome to Crew Classé at Home, Volume 4. For those of you that don't know, my family started Halpern Enterprises in the 1950s and are one of the oldest wine importers of fine wine in Canada. I am proudly the third generation involved. Virtual community was something we believed we needed to create, especially because of our current reality. The amount I learned from friends, suppliers, family, you don't really get that these days, and I'm missing it more and more each passing day. One thing about Crew Classé at Home that really, we stress is that the things you'll see here, you aren't learn in a textbook or watch on TV or in a movie. These are very informal and informative conversations, and I keep going back to the ungoogleable. So I hope you really see that today and tonight in our series. Like other episodes, I have some special guests joining us. Firstly, Ken Fredrickson. Ken is a Master Sommelier and entrepreneur based in Chicago. He has spent most of his career in the import and wholesale space, but his own restaurants and even a winery. He enjoys mentoring, meditation, and writing for his Instagram feed. Ken, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And of course, this evening we are catching up with one of our favorite families in wine, the Duncan family of Silver Oak, a true family business. Tim, Matt, how are you guys?
All good.
Doing well. Thanks,
Hang in
Adam.
there.
Thanks for hosting.
No problem. And last but not least, we have Nate Weis, Silver Oak's winemaker. Nate, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
So guys, I think I wanted to start off with the quick and easy question. I've been lucky enough to come to the winery in Napa and see the beautiful setup you have with your family's history. But Tim, why don't you start off with telling us about the Duncan family history?
So we go back to an auspicious year in California history, 1972. Auspicious not because of the wine people made that year. It was not a very good year, but because of so many founding wineries that year, including Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, Montelena, Burgess, several others. And of course, still at the dawn of, 6 years later from the year 66 that Mondavi even got going. So my dad went out to just explore and spend some time with a family friend who went on to, with his family, start Spotswood, and kicked around and found some dirt that he was interested in. In the same time, went on to meet brother Justin Meyer, who was our founding winemaker, my dad's partner. So that friendship grew quickly in the 71, 72, and by fall of 72, we picked some grapes and started without a facility and without all the things we have today. The beginning of Silver Oak, which was the very first vintage, was just Alexander Valley. But back then, because nobody knew where that was or what that was in Sonoma County, we called it North Coast. Was the appellation.
And Matt, I wanted to hear about your run. I know this means Silver Oak means the world to your family. I've been lucky enough to have some great times with you in the past, especially the past few years. When did you decide that I'm going to join the family business and work alongside your father, your uncle?
Well, I guess we'll skip a few years from what my dad was just saying, 1972, fast forwarding just about 40 years to 2013. I was just out of college, and I was lucky enough to travel around for a little bit after I graduated, and then realized I needed a job. So I wrote up a cover letter, and I wrote a resume of why I thought I could be helpful at the family business. And I walked in and I gave it to my dad, and next thing I knew, I was on the bottling line. So they sent me on a little different journey than I expected, but in the vineyards and in the cellar in 2013, helping to make Twomey Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc. And then in the shipping department, one of the hardest jobs that I had, working through production and the other sides of our business, and eventually found my way to sales, but it was a long, interesting road.
That's awesome. And Nate, you, from what I understand, you are the third winemaker to join Silver Oak in almost 50 years. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was lucky enough to be invited to join in 2014.
That's great. And what was your history before Silver Oak?
Just prior to working here, I had worked at a winery called Antica Napa Valley, which is it's in the Atlas Peak AVA. It's the sort of the California outpost of the Antinori family. And prior to being there, I had been with Patson Hall in Sonoma, making Pinot Noir and barrel fermented Chardonnay.
That's great. And Ken, how are you?
Great to be here, Adam.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know I gave you a quick little intro, but I'm sure you can really blow it out.
Well, first I have to say it's a pleasure to be here. Certainly with Tim and Matt and Nate. I have a long history with Silver Oak myself, actually. Tim probably will remember this, but I was a sommelier in Las Vegas. That's where I started when I came out of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And I went to work. My first serious sommelier job was with a restaurateur named Andre Rochat. And he had Andre's restaurant downtown Las Vegas, and then he did Andre's at the Monte Carlo. And I had never really met anyone who had a passion, and probably still does the way he does, for Silver Oak and his collection of big bottles and 750s was immense. And it was always fun, certainly as a young sommelier, just getting a chance to open up, that was the mid 90s, but getting a chance to open up, some of the legendary wines. 85 Bonnie's, I believe, is on the back of my mind, and some other things. But it's a real pleasure to be here with you guys and talk to you tonight. So, my background, passed the Master Sommelier a long time ago in 2000. So I've been around the block, but a little more working on business these days, importing, wholesale, and so forth. So it's nice to be here.
Well, thank you.
I do remember, Ken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We've met before, and
We have.
Honestly, Andre is such a dear friend and mentor of mine, and he held on to those collections for a long time. I'm curious. I actually tried to reach out for him because he did end up closing his restaurant. I think he moved away, but I'm curious, what remains of his cellar, because it was deep. I mean,
I saw the Monte Carlo location. I remember that. I don't know. There were so many opportunities. He might have just let another great restaurant partner in the area take it from him and kept a few bottles and moved on. But you're right, it was deep.
how's your library collection at the winery? Did you hold on to some early stuff?
That's good. Good question. We're I don't know if sober is the right word, but we are determined not to just let things sit around that are definitely past their prime. So yes, we have some 72, 3, 4, and the first 10 vintages, but very little quantity. It just takes, A, we didn't have that much to begin with, but B, there's no reason to hold things that are way past their prime and are more just interesting. Nate's nodding his head, just from an inventory standpoint, you can put away just, 20 cases of Magnums every year and a few 3 liters. Well, that adds up and becomes, kind of an inventory and logistical nightmare, but
Nate's
as well
done
as let great people buy it. Let, somebody that's got a memory in 85 or 87 or 92 or something, or an anniversary or whatever, and they would love that 3 liter and enjoy it with their family. That's what it's for.
Awesome.
Nate, when was the last time you did a retrospective tasting back to the 70s and 80s? And
Ooh, it was 2 years ago. We're due to do it again this summer.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
The last couple of times we've only gone back as far as like the early 80s, because going back to the 70s, there's not enough bottles around. So,
and to be perfectly honest, those wines have held up fine. The 73, 74, they taste like they did 20 years ago, which is a mature, older cab with, fading color, but they're still delicious. They still remind me of those days for sure.
I had a 78 2 years ago, 78 Alexander Valley, and it was awesome.
Nice. It was still drinkable, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get into, Matt, I really love your display. So we'll get
you like my
into
setup?
what some viewers might be drinking and tasting with us today. But a quick question for you, Tim, that it just passed through my mind is there a percentage of the wine you make every year that you guys know you're going to send to your library? And for those that don't understand, what a library collection is, maybe if you could just dive a little deeper in that for
Sure, definitely. You know, that's what we've challenged even more recently is, do we really need, 50 cases or 40 cases of 750s of a vintage? We do release those and resell them, like I said. So there are, there's plans for it and things that we budget beyond that 50 cases. But yes, what we tend to keep is 3s and 6s, because the 750s and magnums either get consumed or sold. But we definitely have a plan that, we hold on to it pretty much like anybody else does. So you take some Alexander, some Napa, back when we had Bonnie's, a little bit of that, set it aside, keep the inventory up to date, and either through a retrospective tasting or some, other fun events, or of course, consumer requests, we just hold on to it and get to the point where, more recently, we also make 18 liters as well, 12 liters. But even just the few 18 liters, you get to the point where, when are you going to drink one of those? Well, I don't know. We should. Well, actually, there's a customer that wants one for a wedding or a neat, large 50th anniversary for he and his wife and their large family. Go for it. Sell it. Do it. So, and they get the feedback and see how they were. And we have, Nate could dive into this a little bit. We have gone back and recorked most of those wines back from, where are we up to now, Nate?
I believe it was late 90s. We went through late 90s.
So we put new corks in those big bottles and,
Yeah.
just make sure that they're sound. Nate and his team
Yeah.
tastes it, puts a new cork in, tops it up a little bit, and then puts it back in the cellar. So we have some
So that when
assurance that
we
there's-
do sell it, people know that it's, quality. It hadn't, the cork hasn't given out or whatever. The bottle just is still drinkable and worth selling. So.
And Nate, I'm gonna throw this question for you. I understand how bottles are recorked, but do you mind telling some of our viewers what does that recorking process look like? Because some viewers are like, well, you pull the cork on a wine, the oxygen gets to the wine, and now the wine's probably toast. So what does that process look like?
Well, we pull the cork. We have to have an understanding with the customer, the owner of the bottle beforehand. In the case that they're talking about, we're recorking our own bottles in our own library, but we do occasionally do it for customers too who are concerned. So there's always an understanding that, the bottle's been God knows where. So we're going to be honest with you about how it tastes, but we taste it for soundness. So it doesn't have TCA. And then we typically top it up. It depends on the wine. Sometimes we'll try to top it up with the exact same vintage. And other times, if there's not enough of that available, we'll top it up with a like vintage, something that's complementary, really. And we'll typically add a little bit of SO2 to the wine. We'll have a pre-screened cork that we're sure does not have TCA, and then use a vacuum corker to recork the bottle. So, it's not like a fountain of youth necessarily, but the wine is definitely in better shape than when it got to us, and then it should live quite a bit longer with a recorked bottle.
And it's quite successful usually if the wine is good.
Yes. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, more often than not, you'd be surprised how rarely the wine's not good. Actually, if it's a 40-year-old bottle of wine, it's going to taste like a 40-year-old bottle of wine. But it's fairly rare that they show poorly. Typically, given that success rate, we'll find some sort of compromise with the owner of the bottle and slip them something nice. We think the wine shot.
Very good. So Matt, what are we looking at tonight? What's that beautiful lineup you got behind you?
Well, we're drinking a little Twomey Sauvignon Blanc from 2018. It was supposed to be warmer today in Napa than it ended up being, but still a good Sauvignon Blanc day. A little Pinot Noir from the Anderson Valley from our Monument Tree Vineyard. Really, really exciting single vineyard that we've been making for Twomey since 2010. But the new vintage there, the 2017. And then both current vintage Silver Oak wines, 2015 Alexander Valley and 2015 Napa. And off the sort of recorking and ageability point, this is still what Nate is doing, making wines that are meant to age much longer than those wines in the 70s and 80s were thought at the time. So both of those are guaranteed till 2040, guaranteed. They'll probably age longer than that. And then at the end, a little Twomey Merlot, which is just a beautiful, beautiful wine, the 2015, showing really well right now.
Well, I'm going to have a lot of questions, especially about the Merlot, because, I remember the story about 14 and moving forward. We'll jump into that. I know, Ken, I believe you have the Bien Nacido Pinot Noir
Yeah.
with you and you
Nice.
were also looking at the 14s, so Napa and Alex, along with the, I guess, the 18 Sauvignon Blanc. So, the one thing I like to tell our viewers is it is not mandatory to have the wines that we're tasting. Rather, hopefully you learn something. If you happen to have the wine, great. And
Helps
maybe,
though.
yeah, exactly. So, Matt, maybe I'm going to jump to you, Ken, in a second, but I had one question for Matt quickly. Matt, tell me about Twomey. How did that happen?
Twomey. Yeah, so Twomey was named after my great grandmother. So my granddad who co-founded Silver Oak. There came a day in the late 90s where we decided that maybe we could be successful with other kinds of grapes and not only make Cabernet Sauvignon, which was one of Silver Oak's founding philosophies. And so we decided to make a little Merlot. That's where the wine that became Twomey Merlot came from. And he decided to name it after his mother. So his mother's name was Velma Twomey, so he chose her maiden name. And we launched a new winery. Now, originally, Merlot was kind of the first idea when we experimented with Pinot Noir. It took a long time before we got to making really wonderful Pinot Noirs that we were proud of and started to sell. But that was 1999, so 20 plus years ago now.
Oh, that's great.
And today we have 3.5, let's call it a half, wineries for Twomey. So we have one winery in Calistoga, that's where we make the Twomey Merlot in Napa. And then as we go to the Russian River in Sonoma, we have our Twomey West winery. That's where we make our Russian River Pinots, I should say, and our Central Coast Pinots, Biendecito that you have, Ken, there. And then we also make a Soberanes Pinot and a Gary's Vineyard Pinot from the Santa Lucia Highlands there. And then our newest winery in the Anderson Valley, a really, really beautiful spot, not too far from the Monument Tree Vineyard that I'm tasting behind. And then sort of the half winery that we're joking about is our Oregon property in Dundee. We have a really spectacular vineyard in Dundee called Prince Hill. We don't have a winemaking facility on that property yet, but we're working on it in due course.
That's great. Well, I'm excited to try those wines. Ken, you've been involved with wine in California for some time. How have you seen the landscape evolve over time there?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important to remember is it's such a compressed timeline, in all honesty. And someone like Silver Oak's been around pretty much almost the entire time. I mean, I think somewhere in the mid 60s, we saw our first new winery since Prohibition. And, so, early in the 70s, you saw some of these iconic wines, that we know, today come into play, Heights and Silver Oak and these guys. So the timeline's pretty short, but I'll tell you, it's been an absolute rocket ship the last 10 years. Just amazing where people are going to plant vineyards and to experiment with varietals. It's been a renaissance. I mean, for the last 10 years, it's just really nice to see. I mean, look at Silver Oak here. I mean, they went to Merlot 20 years ago, but they're also in Biendecito doing Pinot, looking at Oregon for Pinot. I mean, you have to have that mentality today in California, actually probably anywhere in the New World, and it's available, So I see the landscape changing in a sense, there's people that want to try and experiment and try these new things. And then also I see people that are coming back, everything that's old is new again, right? So you have a lot of, top level sommeliers that are in love with Stony Hill, in love with Maya Comets, just like really looking for these older vintages and promoting these older vintages because the wines are fantastic. And, one thing I would say is, tasting globally and tasting myself, American oaked old Riojas, 50, 60 years old, that are just sexy and beautiful. I mean, the recipe's there for older California wines, I believe. They can be quite stunning.
That's great. Matt and Tim, this one, we discussed as a team some questions and some topics before this. I have my thoughts on this, but I want to get yours. The uniqueness of Silver Oak, and Silver Oak in particular, we'll talk about Twomey in a sec, but the fact that it's, all 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, all American new oak, which we'll talk about the cooperage also. But what is it that has made this Silver Oak such an icon? And basically it's made it on every esteemed wine list in the country, even up here in Canada. It's quite an easy job for what you guys have really made. So how did that, happen? Is there some, Tim, maybe you'll have a better answer for this. Is there like a click that happened in California with Silver Oak that made this such a household name like it has become today?
Absolutely. It's a trade secret, Adam. I can't divulge how that happened. Honestly, Ken will attest to this too. Part of what Silver Oak, or what has made Silver Oak so successful, is the size that we've become, meaning we don't make 500, 1,000, 2,000 cases. We make a nice amount of Alexander and then complement it with our Napa Valley. So we're able to distribute, all throughout Canada, throughout the whole world. We're in 54 different countries now. And, some of them are very, very small, 5, 10, 20 cases. Others are, heading towards 1,000. Canada all rolled up, South Korea, Japan, while we're all, waiting to see how the next several months go. Those countries are going to come back and we're going to continue to sell in those places. Our price point was modest. We feel like it still is today. So that when you get a wine list, even at, 130, 140 to 200 for the Alexander and a little more for the Napa, that's something that still, rings true to people. And whether you're in a nice continental, contemporary restaurant or steakhouse, we are still, priced well rather than $400, $500, $600, $700, $800, which, there's a place in a market for those wines too. So we call ourselves the affordable luxury. And I think that still rings true today. Our style, as Ken was suggesting with the American oak, is unique. So if you want to try a Napa Valley Cab with French oak, they're a dime a dozen, and they're not a dime anymore. They're expensive, and they're lovely wines. They're just a different construction, different style than what we do. And frankly, we really feel like our wines age beautifully. I know, Adam, you're on the 14s in Canada, is that right?
We've released the 14 Alex and Napa, and we're going to be moving to the 15s sometime this summer.
So I looked in my cellar. Unfortunately, I only had the 04, not a 14. So I had to go back an extra 10 years, but it proves the point. This wine is just as lovely today as it was 10 years ago. And will continue to just age gently, beautifully. And yeah, I think, back to those older vintage discussions, what really kicked Silver Oak into gear was buying the mid-90s rage, 94, 97 wines, and somebody saying, well, wait a second, I think I have an older bottle, and they pull a cork on an 84 or a, 87 or an 82 or something and say, wow, I thought that wine would have been dead. It is beautiful now. And the Somm community definitely saw that too, that our wines age beautifully and have that structure. It's kind of, a bit of a mystery because they are so accessible and delicious early and young, but man, they 20 years, 25 years, they are terrific, even in 750. Adam, did we lose you?
Yeah, we might have lost Adam, but I'll add to that if I can, just the idea of Silver Oak, I guess from the beginning, which we've sort of summarized now, focus only on Cabernet Sauvignon, American oak, high quality wines. We think at a value, but high quality, in the 70s was $6 a bottle. So that culture of changing the idea of what California Napa Sonoma wine could be, Cabernet only was a really weird idea originally. And that philosophy of constantly innovating is something that we've really, really kept close and foundational to the company. Nate could probably speak about some of the innovations we're working on right now, but it hasn't stopped just because, the big structural things were decided long ago. We've improved a lot in a lot of different ways since.
Sorry, guys. Adam kind of has a little bit of an issue here, so I'm going to jump on. I'm Chris, by the way. And nice to meet you in person, and the other guys, I saw you guys a little bit earlier. So sorry to get back on track here. So you're on cooperage. Can you guys tell us about the history and where that kind of came from and why you guys decided to actually start your own, or not start your own, but maybe purchase or start, or at least get into that?
Another important point, but Nate, why don't you tackle the oak?
Sure. So, when when Justin and Ray founded Silver Oak, they founded it on American oak, and that's what we're going to do, which sounds a little unusual now, but in 72 wasn't that crazy of an idea. Some of the great wines of the Napa Valley in the 50s and 60s were all made in American oak because that's what was available to people. So they would use even whiskey casks and condition them. So they started out using American oak, and like everybody else, they would sort of worked with different cooperages and would buy what they could. And there was a cooperage in Missouri that really became very intertwined with the style of Silver Oak. So if you recognized and enjoyed the style of Silver Oak, you would really enjoy the other people who use these particular barrels. A lot of that had to do with the specifics of their toasting process there at this cooperage in a little town called Higbee, Missouri. And so, we became basically their biggest customer, and we're for decades, literally. And early in the 2000s, the Duncan family, invested in the cooperage. They basically bought half of the cooperage to help out the managing partner who was a little bit cash strapped at the time. And we were really interested in making sure we had availability and could ensure supply of these American oak barrels because it was such a big part of what Silver Oak was. And then in 2015, we got the chance to actually buy the other half. And so the family invested in that, and that was a real chance for improving quality. So we pretty much immediately started pushing the envelope on all the different levers you can pull in barrel making, which are basically where do you grow the trees? Because trees have terroir just like grapevines do. And then how do you season the wood? So once you create a stave, you essentially put it outside in the elements for an extended amount of time, be that 2 years, 3 years, if you want to get crazy, you can do 4 years, 5 years as well. And then the toasting process. So we started to play around with all of those things. So it's kind of a unique thing. I definitely never thought as a winemaker I'd be involved in helping run a cooperage and really looking behind the curtain. But it's been a really exciting process, and it's all about doubling down and ensuring supply and quality for forever, essentially, for our wines.
And now, in terms of Cabernet production, for the difference between something like American oak and French oak or Slovenian oak, could you dive into that a little bit as well?
Yeah, there's a number of differences. Obviously, they're different species, for one, different species of Quercus. That's a very important point. But then there's the terroir idea of they're grown in different places. So the soil you grow a tree in, the amount of water it holds, how much sunlight it gets, that all matters to trees as well. And then there's some very kind of specific biological differences between the trees. For example, American oak has more of what are called tyloses, which are basically, we're going to get a little into the plant phys area of Cru Classé today, but it's basically something that clogs up the vasculature of the plant. And so what that means in a practical sense is that American oak can be sawn rather than split. So French oak has to be split because if it's not split just right along the grain, then it'll leak. Whereas American oak is a lot more forgiving in that, so it makes it a lot more efficient to log and to mill, basically. And then as far as flavor profiles and the effect on wine, American oak, they have very similar profile of all the different things that make a barrel present itself in a wine. The main difference is the different species and the different areas have different proportions of those things. And so American oak has a lot of what we call whiskey lactones. And they're so named because you find them in whiskey because whiskey uses a lot of American oak. And so they have different proportions of those things and just a lot more whiskey lactone. And you would recognize that in a wine if you had a Silver Oak in front of you as the vanilla, the coconuts, those sorts of characters.
Hey, can I ask a quick question? Having a cooperage now for Silver Oak after all these years is probably a huge investment, a great luxury, but also like for a winemaker, almost like a kid in a candy store. So I have to ask, because you go around the world and you see conical shaped barrels on both ends. You see larger sized oak. You see people building and coopering their own oak fermentation tanks. So are you guys moving in that direction at all? I mean, are you doing, still staying traditional in your ferments and stuff like that?
We are moving that way, actually more for Twomey, honestly. We're using kind of untraditional or again, what's new, what's old is new again type of fermentation vessels like concrete and wood. For Silver Oak, really the barrel aging is what differentiates it. So our goal has really been more to refine and perfect that barrel. But we have started to play with different size formats. So the traditional whiskey barrels, 53 gallons, traditional wine barrels, 59. We've made some 70-gallon barrels. I think when I show up in Missouri at the cooperage, the guys just they don't like to see me coming necessarily because they don't ask for this time, So we've had a lot of seasoning experiments. We've developed some new toasts, kind of as is often the case, sometimes by accident. They said, "Hey, we messed up on this barrel and we did this." I said, "Well, let's put some wine in it and figure out what happens. What effect does that have on the wine?" So we've done a little bit of that, but really the first thing we did is said, "Okay, let's create reproducibility. Let's perfect making this one barrel, and then we'll start to branch out from there and start doing all sorts of crazy other stuff."
Tell them how you keep track of all those experiments, Nate, and the grower lot concept.
Oh, yeah. Well, those experiments actually, they take a lot of tracking because we had a couple theories about seasoning. One was it doesn't just matter how long you season the stave, it matters how many winters it goes through. So,
Oh, wow.
So you theoretically
You see expand and contract.
a relatively short full season profile, but if you had 2 winters or even 3 winters, it would make a very big difference versus the amount of time. And so we had a lot of kind of individual experiments of shorter time, but 2 winters versus longer time, but 1 winter. And then, Matt's talking about the grower lots is we blend very, very early. So one of our unique winemaking approaches is that we blend before we go to barrel. So we're in the process of we go through the process of blending the 2019s. We did that around the summer of last year, for example. So we blend, we put the wines in barrel, then they age as one big blend for the whole period. The downside is we don't get to watch how individual vineyards or blocks develop. So we'll take a couple barrels of just about every fermentation, set that aside, and then we bottle those on their own. So we have a massive library of these quote unquote grower lots, which are basically individual vineyards that went into the big Silver Oak blend that we'll go back and taste every so often and just kind of evaluate how they age, where do we miss the boat, where do we make really good decisions, and really kind of deconstruct and reconstruct our approach each vintage.
And Nate, why would you do that? Why would you make that decision to blend prior to going down to barrel instead of doing it afterwards? Is there
I think the number one reason, the very simple, most direct answer is we're blending the wine based on the wine's inherent qualities at that point. We're not blending on what barrel it's been in, whether it's new or old, or any variety of other issues. We're really just looking at the raw kind of naked wine and putting together the best blend we can based on that.
And you mentioned keeping the lots kind of separated, at least for a short period of time. Is the Silver Oak's approach is obviously always to blend to the Napa appellation of Alex Valley. Is there a reason why you don't do single vineyard releases as well, or is it just always, maybe you can go into that.
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical one. And, we were talking about why people are attracted to Silver Oak, what makes us attractive to people. And I think that inherent focus, and we know who we are, we know what we do. We make 2 wines. 20 years ago, we made 3, and going from 3 to 2 was like a giant sea shift for us when we went from making Bonnies to not making Bonnies. And I think people can relate to that. They can understand it. And so we do have individual vineyards in the portfolio that I love and are really exciting. And, you know, if we were a different sort of company, we might make single vineyards from, but that's just not what we do. So
Bettering primarily off first growth Bordeaux and, you know, what the Bordelais do. Exactly. Ken was gonna, yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, you guys have followed a path that the greatest Cabernet and Merlot producers in the world have followed the same thing. I mean, you can walk through any of those vineyards, and some of them are very big, and see and taste, even if you're there at harvest, different fruit profiles in the grapes. And ultimately, they're bringing it all back in and putting it into, you know, one wine. And just so the people that are, you know, there's a lot of new wine lovers on this as well. So just to follow up on a couple things where we quickly got out there on oak style and cooperage. But so everyone knows there's the two probably biggest components to Cabernet are really fruit and wood. And those two things really drive it. So one of the reasons that we're deep in the weeds here talking about oak is because everybody that's, you know, wants to know what their Cabernet is the best varietal to express, in my opinion, pretty oak characteristics. And so I think that's why we were talking so much about it. And you talk about, you know, the toast and how long it's aged and all of that. It's not just about the Cabernet fruit that's in there.
Absolutely. Now, I was at the Alexander property for the first time last year, and obviously I think if no one's been, I mean, obviously you guys have been, but if people who are watching haven't been, it's a pretty remarkable structure. And obviously the first thing you notice is just your commitment to alternative energy sources. Obviously when you take the tour, you learn about all of your dedication to reusing water and things like that. Could you guys go into speaking of your approach into obviously sustainability, the LEED certifications that you guys have, and if you see some of your contemporaries following the same path?
Matt, you want to tackle some of that?
Yeah, what a great question, Chris. That would have been for my sister Haley, who's not on today, but that's really her area of expertise. So my sister Haley has been our project manager for a variety of different projects, mostly focused on sustainability. So what you were just talking about, Chris, the Alexander Valley Winery, which just opened up for wine production in 2017, really is a series of innovations put together. You mentioned the water. That's a really exciting way for us to reuse the water on site on the property in a big fancy machine called a membrane bioreactor. We call it the MBR. And what it effectively does is recycle the water from the cellar. So all the different citric acids and caustic acids and things we need to use to keep the winery clean, that water usually goes down the drain, but we can recycle it and use it again. So what we've been able to achieve, which my sister just tabulated and calculated at the end of last year, was that for the Silver Oak Alexander Valley, we are now using just as much water as we are producing wine. So 1 gallon of water used is producing a gallon of wine. The industry average is about 10 gallons of water used to produce 1 gallon of wine. In the Napa Valley Winery, we're about 4 to 1, so that's better. But the Alexander Valley has really taken water sustainability to the next level. We have a whole array of solar panels as well that produce on site. Again, the Alexander Valley Winery, about 105% of the energy that we need in a year. So that's all tracked and calculated, and that's how we keep up with the certifications we have. The most famous certifications that we have are called LEED, Leadership in Energy Efficiency and Design. And so they have a couple different tiers, silver, gold, and platinum being the highest. And there are a number of wineries around the world that have gold. It's fairly difficult to achieve, but there are only 2 wineries in the world that have platinum, and those are the Silver Oak Napa and Silver Oak Alexander Valley wineries. So it's something we've invested a lot of time, a lot of money in, and it's going to help us in the long term. I mean, that water recycling, for instance, that's the same water that we would pull out of the ground to irrigate the vines. So the less of it we pull out over time, the more of it we have to irrigate if we need to.
That's amazing. It's is there a reason why you guys went that way? Because you see so many wineries start now, and some speak to sustainability and some don't. Is there a reason why you're so focused on it in Napa? I know obviously there's been a lot of water shortages in Napa recently, a lot of fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Nate could speak to it pretty well also, but I think the point is that we want without being too reductive, we want to do things that work. What is the science behind it, and how does it impact, our business and the quality of our wine? We don't want to just, do things in the vineyards because we think they might have an effect. No, what is the real scientific effect? And one great area of research that we've been doing since 2009 relates to irrigation and how much water the vines actually need, how much they take up in their root systems, what the evaporative demand is in the atmosphere, how the different, vintages and years affect that, how the different irrigation decisions we make affect that. And so one thing we've learned a number of years ago, but still practice it, and this is where, can and should come in, is irrigating less and irrigating for really precise and specific reasons. We had many, many years of drought in California and many drought vintages. And so protecting those water resources, not just for, the next 2 years, but in a sort of 10+ year, really long-term way of thinking is really critical, even if we happen to have enough water right now and happen to not be irrigating that much right now because we have wet winters.
And maybe for both Tim and Ken, now that you guys have focused on kind of doing that and that has obviously evolved vintage after vintage, how have you seen that effect on the wines themselves in terms of?
Part back to Nate too, but the consistency of any winery's product year after year is the toughest part. The vintage changes, the crop load changes, even our oak sources have changed over 2 decades. So we aren't trying to make the exact same wine every year, but we're trying to make a style. And, that's that consistency and that focus on that has really always been our main driver. When Nate puts the blend to bed, we taste the last 3 or 4 vintages, some of them, of course, in bottle at that point, to just get our, bearings. Not that we're trying to, again, represent exactly what Justin was envisioning in 1972, but if you have your customer base and you have a style, you want to be able to be true to that. How it's affected it over time, I think we just, like Matt was suggesting, continue to get better in the vineyard, better in the cellar. We have that coined phrase, have yet to make our best bottle of wine. And that's, if you approach it every day like that, then your results over time will share that. Again, you're going to have a vintage with the weather or some other issue that's more challenging. But when we nail it, and we really feel like we've been doing it recently, year after year, they show and they age, and we really won't know. My favorite right now is kind of the 13s. I just think that vintage was smoking. We had a Pinot last night from Williams-Sonoma. It was really good. But our Silver Oak, Alex, and our Napa are just showing, a little bit right now. I'll drink that the rest of my life. I'll drink that in 20, 25, 30 years and enjoy it just as much. And so we have those styles that kind of come through. But Nate, do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to ask Nate if you could touch on Napa and Alexander Valley. I mean, I have both 14s open tonight, and I've always been partial to Alexander Valley in young vintages. The younger the wine, I really like it. I think the aromatics are a little more lifted, a little more perfumed, even tonight. And maybe just talk about, because I think everybody's probably, starting there.
Sure, Ken. I think, for people that aren't familiar with California geography, the Napa Valley, Napa County is, north of San Francisco, a bit inland. We're a couple of mountain ridges in from the ocean. Alexander Valley is in northern Sonoma County, so it's more or less northwest of Napa Valley proper. The mountain range that defines the western edge of the Napa Valley is the eastern edge of Alexander Valley, is kind of a good way to describe it. So Alexander Valley is a little bit closer to the coast. Geologically, soil-wise, they're both incredibly diverse. So actually they're very similar in that sense, in that there's not one thing you can point to and say, this is Alexander Valley soil or geology, and this is Napa Valley. They were both formed by more or less the same sources. And just like all of California, all of Northern California, that area, we've got sedimentary stuff, we've got volcanic, we've got metamorphic rock. We're sort of they're similar in that they're all over the board. The big difference to me is proximity to the ocean. So Alexander Valley is a little bit cooler of a climate in general. You know, again, you have to speak in fairly broad brushes with these things because both regions have their cool sites, their warm sites, elevation plays a role in all that. But for us, Alexander Valley definitely shows more cooler climate, Bordeaux style aromas and structure. Acidity's a little bit higher. I think you're right, Ken, that the perfume and the bright aromatics, and there's always kind of like a slight spicy herbaceousness to the Alexander Valley, which is very classic and something that I love. Napa Valley is a little bit warmer of a climate. You know, our winemaking is slightly different for the two in the sense that Napa Valley is also a bigger, it's more of a blend. So we do use more Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. Alexander Valley is typically 95% Cabernet or more, although we have started to use a little bit more Petit Verdot in Alexander Valley. And so the tannin structure is very, very different in Napa. It's a denser wine because it's a warmer climate. The tannins are very ripe and they're very round, which is sort of a hallmark of Napa Valley in general. So those are really kind of the differences to me typically. But I think, you know, Alexander Valley being one ridge over closer to the coast makes all the difference in the world as far as wine style.
And I'd love to touch on, since we're talking about the wines and the varietals and things like that, I'd love to touch on Sauvignon Blanc from Twomey. And in particular, obviously it's the white, which, you know, a lot of people aren't used to seeing from someone like Silver Oak, but if they know Twomey well, they would know it. Why is either one of you from Silver Oak folks, why would you consider Sauvignon Blanc to be so successful in Napa? And how would you compare it to Bordeaux Blanc, since you do kind of go in that direction, generally speaking, with your wines? Who wants to answer that one?
That's a great one for Nate, I think.
For me?
Yeah.
So, you know, Sauvignon Blanc, we look for it. It's a variety that's to really dive into the farming. It's not a variety that responds to water stress, which we have a term called isohydric for that. So the farming is a little bit different, and we look for places where you're not going to get water stress to plant it, which basically means, you know, heavier soils, lower elevation, valley floor type things. So we have a few sites in Napa and Sonoma County that are close to the Russian River. Our Oakville winery is actually in between Con Creek and the Napa River. It's sort of a floodplain. So it's very deep, fertile soil, and that's a great place for Sauvignon Blanc. So as far as farming, that's kind of the approach we take, and it's we put probably as much or more care. Honestly, I think our farming costs are higher for Sauvignon Blanc than just about anything else because it grows a bit like a weed, and it requires a lot of handwork because of those deep soils that it's planted in. And it's just kind of you know, the Sauvignon is sauvage, really. It's a crazy plant to farm. But I'm kind of getting away from the wine style. So the wine style that we make, really, if I were gonna say we had a beacon on a hill or what we wanted to emulate, it's Sancerre. So we're going for dry, crisp, fresh, something that, you know, you love by the pool in the summer on the patio. Minerality, it doesn't have to have a ton. Yeah, I think the big difference between what we make and what Bordeaux Blancs tend to be is we use a little bit of oak and we use a touch of new oak, but really only so that we have used barrels in the future. That's the amount of new oak we bring into the program. We don't want much oak influence other than the texture. We want a little bit of creaminess from the lees contact and the stirring, which you have to have something like a barrel or a stainless steel drum or a puncheon to do that. But we really don't want much oak influence on the wine. We want freshness. We want the aromatics to be clean and pure. Where Bordeaux Blancs have, I do love Bordeaux Blanc style wines like Oak Blanc. I think it's a fantastic wine. It's just a different expression and concept of Sauvignon Blanc than we have.
Absolutely. And now, since we're still talking varietals, Merlot. Obviously, you guys do a pretty killer Merlot. Napa Merlot in particular. You guys brought on Jean-Claude from Petrus as a consulting winemaker. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to do that, etc.?
So Jean-Claude Barraway was is a friend of Daniel Barron's, and that's our second winemaker, Nate's previous boss, and our winemaker Justin hired. So right from the get-go, Daniel brought some of those ideas to Silver Oak. That was the vintage back in '94 that we brought in Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Merlot into Napa for the first time. And that was directly from Daniel's experience, not only at Petrus, but primarily at Dominus in the Napa Valley. And, you know, he kept in touch with Jean-Claude, having worked with him and for him, and said, you know, next time he's in town seeing Dominus, would you guys like to meet him? And so we did. And in '99, when we bought a vineyard in the southeast part of Napa, that is still a cornerstone of both our Napa and obviously our Twomey Merlot program, because it has the Merlot on it. Jean-Claude saw it with Daniel's blessing and, you know, brought an idea to Justin and the Duncans at the time to make a wine from that. Justin wasn't interested and said, I'm going to, you know, continue to do some other things with my son, but the Duncans were. And so Daniel initially just had him kind of from afar consulting and bringing some ideas, and then more, you know, fast forward a dozen years and we've institutionalized that and really get a lot out of bringing him in, tasting with Jean-Claude, seeing how he does the blends. He gets, you know, just enough time to see what's going on at Silver Oak to understand, but focuses primarily on the Merlot.
Well, I
Nate,
feel
go
like,
ahead.
go ahead. I don't know if anyone else wants
So Nate, from your opinion.
I'll tell you, you know, respect for somebody that does the same thing you do as a profession is you know, it's not easy to come by. I've never seen a guy blends as well as he does. So, you know, I think it comes from making Petrus, but not only that, but all the other Moyix wines over the years where he was blending 40, 50 wines a year. But he'll come in, we'll show him the different wines that we think would be a good fit for the Merlot. And he'll basically taste through them, and he can just sort of, he's kind of John Nash in the sense he sees all the connections and can put the wine together in his mind. And quite often we have a couple days with him, and the first wine he puts together just off the cuff is the best wine we make in that blending session. So the guy is really kind of amazing. More than kind of amazing, he is amazing.
But he's such a sweet man. He's not the kind of consultant that comes in there and goes, listen, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what I want to end up with. He's all about questions. It's a very Socratic method. So the idea when we're talking about the Twomey Merlot and its expression of Soda Canyon is, what are you looking for? That is the full extent of Jean-Claude's, you know, advice and consulting is, what do you want out of it? And then, you know, as you sort of extrapolate that, he will guide and continue to ask questions. But it's not as though he comes in and, you know, says, this is the best wine from the vineyard and this vintage and they're done, where's my fee? You know, that's not the kind of guy he is.
Which I've learned that should be what you expect out of a consultant. Really, if that's not the first thing they ask you, your ears should perk up a little bit.
Yeah.
They need to know what the goal is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, speaking of kind of trying new things and expanding new things like Tim touched on, you guys obviously haven't, please feel free to correct me on this. Ovid?
Yep, no, that's right.
Canadians pronounce it differently. Some Canadians pronounce it Ovid. So I like to make sure that we're correct. Could you talk about the acquisition of Ovid and what you guys are trying to do there as well?
Sure, that was my brother David's main focus with a friend of ours that has joined our management team, friend of his rather, and now friend of ours, Jack Bentner. And they knew the founding family that started it. And back to Nate's point about consultants, they had, you know, a lot of cool people that were working on it and trying to create a really robust Pritchard Hill Cabernet, and then from there go beyond other varietals that work up there, Syrah included, and a really interesting white that the winemaker Austin has spearheaded, even though it's tiny production, you know, very interesting wines too. So it's just an opportunity for us to see and experience that very upper echelon of the Napa Valley up on Pritchard Hill and in those price points. A different model, primarily direct to consumer, but you know, some wholesale over time. And they've got a great history and a great pedigree that we just saw an opportunity to learn from and add to. And that's what we're still doing today.
Chris, we have a question about Bordeaux blends.
Yes, go for it. Let me check.
So Scott asked why California winemakers have not tried to market Bordeaux style blends like a Silver Oak Twomey blends. And, you know, we have kind of asked ourselves the same question over the years at times, especially given we have somebody like Jean-Claude coming in to help us and work with us. So I guess what I would say is stay tuned. We have a few things in the works, a few ideas about that. You know, sort of taken Jean-Claude and sat down with him at times and said, so let's say there were no rules about this particular wine. What would we do? And something may be coming of that. So we agree, Scott, wholeheartedly.
What about your take on that, Ken? I know you.
Well, I mean, I think it's fantastic. I mean, you're just sitting here looking at, you know, one of the greatest icons in Napa Valley that has, you know, like I said earlier, what the whole, what I see happening in the California wine world is, you know, being open to trying new things and trying change. You know, I think one of the things that's interesting is when Silver Oak started, it was valley floor, valley floor, valley floor. And then it went hills, mountain, you know, Pritchard Hill, where they're talking about, you know, it's 1,700 feet elevation, likely somewhere in there. I mean, it's very high off the valley floor, and you saw this change, and now you see climate having a major impact. I'm sure these are things that are all on the minds of winemakers, you know, certainly every day. There's no doubt about it. The big risks are climate, leading to probably, not always, but oftentimes, to thunderstorms and fires and these kinds of things that are big challenges. So I think having some diversity, like they've done with, you know, you guys have done with Twomey and you're doing with the Pinots, which are, you know, I know you guys think I'm drinking Biennacido. I'm actually drinking a Russian River tonight, and it's just, you know, it's so expressive. It's super cool to see how pretty that is. And you know, I don't want to say you guys can do it all, but if the Cabernet is any part of, you know, your history and your DNA, and you're going to do Pinot the same way and so forth, it's going to be amazing. So good for you guys.
Well, I have to throw some serious love out to our whole winemaking team. You know, I'm sitting here as the representative tonight, but we have people focused on individual wines and individual places, and so it would be very incorrect for me to sit here and say that you know, I am the representative of all the winemaking we do. So we have people that are focused on Pinot Noir, we have people that are focused on Alexander Valley, people focused on Napa Valley, and so on grape growing and winemaking.
Yeah, and
we find experts at what they do.
Exactly. And what was it that drove you guys to Oregon? Was it just different expressions of Pinot? Was it climate change? What was it that brought you guys up to?
Part of that was just relationships that we formed, partly through getting to know Jack Bentner, because he had in a previous role been up there more. And so similar to how my dad and Justin figured out Silver Oak, we just go up there and spend a couple days and look around and talk to people and taste wines. And currently, for those on this call, you know, there's a lot of opportunity still. It's really a neat atmosphere that Ken's shaking his head vigorously. I agree. You know, that's kind of like in the 70s and 80s in California. People are welcoming, they have ideas. You want to grab some lunch, you want to taste my wines. They're just happy to have you there. And when I say they, or, you know, have us there, I mean the California vintners. So a lot of California wineries have gone up there and had great success and just kind of learning what's going on and starting either with, you know, other outside the box varieties or primarily Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And it's just a neat community. We just have fallen in love with it. We own one property, but certainly, you know, as Matt was suggesting, plan to build on that property and continue to look for new opportunities up there.
Tim, you should tell them about Taste Some Wine in Dickie Rass Garage.
Yeah. So one of the sparks that took us to this piece of property was getting to know Dick Erath. And for those that don't know that name, he was one of the two primary founders in the late 60s. And, way before, back when California was still just getting its act together, he was up there trying to get some bench clones and put some Pinot Noir vines in the soil. So now fast forward to 4 years ago, I guess now, he had decided, having sold his winery about 15 years ago now, that it was time to sell his home and his property and retire completely. So his son was a fan of the band, or the performer actually, Prince, and he registered and called his property, which is a hill up there, Prince Hill. So we went and met him there, and we're talking to him and said, well, Dick, yeah, I'm thinking about selling. I don't know that I'm, there yet, but I'm going to find the right family. And you guys seem like, nice gentlemen. And would you like to try my wine? We said, well, Dick, I thought you sold your winery. I don't, and you sell your grapes. We've been talking about that too. We would like to buy some grapes. No, I have a little winery right on the property. Let's go down there and try it. Well, he thiefed out of the 2 barrels that he keeps in there, this 8-month-old brand new wine, and put it in the glass. And I was like, exactly, Ken, wow. I tried the sample, finished it. I was like, Dick, can I have some more? I'm sorry, I drank that. I didn't dare spit it out. It was so delicious. And it is location, that piece of ground and that hill that he saw in the 60s to build his home on, still today, and in our hands will produce some terrific wines from that area. So that was, a memory that only goes back like a barn find some Ferrari in a barn. You find these 2 barrels in the barn, and and I wish, I think he's bottled some of those. I wish we could buy it, be given a couple of them just to see how they age. But we're very excited about that location, right outside the town of Dundee, for those that know where that is. So
It's been interesting to see the evolution of Pinot Noir and it being taken seemingly more seriously in places like California. I know, Ken, you had obviously involvement in Brewer-Clifton for a while there as well, but I don't know if you want to touch on the kind of the evolution of Pinot in particular in the past few years for California as well.
kind of our style, maybe Nate, yeah, or Ken, either one.
Nate, you take it.
What was the question?
How the style is evolved and where we kind of come down on style in terms of Pinot.
Yeah, the style wars in all wine styles in California are they've happened over the years, and Pinot's gone this way and that, and very much the extremes. Our winemaker, our Twomey winemaker that's focused on Pinot Noir, Justin Hirigoyen, definitely falls. He is a French citizen, was educated in Burgundy, worked his kind of perfected his craft over there. So he definitely falls into the fresh and bright camp of California Pinot Noir. But it's sort of interesting, both with he and with Jean-Claude Berrouet, when they come to California, one of the things they really like is the fact that we can get grapes ripe. So certainly they don't want to sacrifice ripeness and phenolic maturity for just having low alcohol. And so he's kind of, I really enjoy his take on it. So he's definitely embracing the fact that we're making wine in California, but with a little bit of an old world bent to it. So, California Pinot Noir especially has gone every which way and into very big extremes at times. And I think we're kind of finding the pendulum starting to slow down, the inertias get less and less. So we're finding our middle ground at this point, I would say, after years of pretty big extremes.
And even Great Burgundy has maybe gone there a little more, but not, the true Burgundy houses are still trying to make the wines that expresses the land and the fruit the best, and not, not over extracted, not something that it shouldn't be and that it's not. You agree, Tim?
The Russian River Pinot is incredibly elegant. It's fresh. Alcohol is completely in check. I had a double take to see what it was. I mean, it's a really pretty wine. It's beautiful wine.
Even down to the color.
Yeah.
So, it looks like a Pinot Noir. It doesn't look like, I'm not sure what it is.
No, 100%. And I think you've seen some really big brands, Pinot Noir, California Pinot Noir, that have set sort of that, when we talk about stylistically, the two camps. The camp that you guys are in, these elegant, fresh, a little lower alcohol, looking for the fruit. And then you have another camp that's a little bit riper, a little denser, a little more viscous. They're looking for texture for sure. Because people like that. Let's not.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that people don't love that. I call it the book club test. If I pour this wine to a book club and 9 out of 10 people raise their hand, they're like, "I love it. This is delicious. What is it?" Pretty much it's going to be about texture and mouth filling and sort of this richness. And then it's the wine geek club that gets nerdy and they're like, "Okay, I smell lavender. Where am I getting that?" And you kind of geek out on it. And I think that those two styles, as they went, in a spectrum, I think majority of premium Pinot now in California is premium Pinot. Deserves to be on the world stage. It's its own thing, whether it's down in Santa Barbara or out on the coast in Russian River, wherever it is. It's gotten better and better over the years. It's world-class stuff no matter what. And Oregon's the same way. I'm a huge fan of Oregon Pinot.
Oregon's a special place and very exciting.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys. I know in the past you've done, this just came to me after listening to all of these things you're doing, these oak trials. You have your own cooperage. You're working with Pinot Noir. You've got multiple winemakers focused on particular varietals and terroirs. You really have a lot of information. How are you getting that information to the sommelier community? How do you sort of transmit that beyond having a national sales director type of thing? Are you doing, I know you used to do like a sommelier, I don't know if it was a sommelier summit or what have you, but I think, I just love to know what you guys are up to right now in that regard.
Yeah, so we've done some stuff like that, particularly in the Bay Area where, the ability for sommeliers and wine professionals to travel to the wineries or vineyards is just so much more easy. So we've brought groups of sommeliers up to the winery, spent time with Nate, even once when Jean-Claude was here, and we got to walk the vineyard with him and then go taste library verticals of Twomey Merlot. We sponsor and support local groups, so Pinot Forum and bringing sommeliers from around the country to come, learn about Russian River Pinot, for example. Or then pretty healthy involvement and partnership with Texom, a great sommelier wine professional focused conference in Texas and Dallas every year. It's not sort of a Silver Oak Twomey show. We sit very politely in the back and help them put together other really wonderful education programs. But I go down there and, you network with them and you engage, it's a community and you have to engage and get real answers about, how you're making wine.
Yeah, I think
We do also, go ahead, Ken.
I think you'd find a lot of sommeliers that would even make the trip to Missouri to the cooperage. It's
some of that too.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool to watch a barrel being made. We also do hundreds of wine dinners a year. And once we can all get back out of our houses, we'll do those again. A great way to get to know the chef, the buyer, but also the somm, who's pulling the corks and, doing the classic service with his team and talking about those wines in a way that you just don't get a chance in a 5-minute account call. So it's really those evenings I find are great, bridge building opportunities too.
Is there a belief, Tim, that you guys have had to be part of the dining room experience? Truth be told, you could sell every single bottle that you guys make, Alexander and Napa Cab, to the mailing list or releasing it at the winery. You see a group of people a mile long. In today's social distancing, 6 foot apart, it'd be, from there all the way to San Francisco, a line waiting to pick up your wines. But what is, you really champion the restaurant. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It was really the foundation and the philosophy we were built on. And having been here more than a month, going on 35 years, it's something that I still believe in. Like I just mentioned, not only is it a good time to get to know the trade and the account, but then to have 50, 60, up to 80, 100 people taste your wine with food, talk about it amongst themselves and have us be able to give a pitch is priceless. And that consumer focus is so key that it's great. And we appreciate that more now than ever, that people are buying retail and taking it home and aging it the best they can, enjoying it with their friends and family. But in that restaurant atmosphere, it just doesn't get any better. And the way that the food and the cuisine and the scene has changed from Toronto to Miami to San Francisco, all over Vegas, obviously just so different than it was 20 years ago in a great way, is just an opportunity. It's just too good to pass up. Yes, the sales are good, but it's really that atmosphere. And, our wines are meant to be consumed with food and meant to be food friendly, from Sauvignon Blanc all the way up to Napa Cab. And it just, it's that telling of the story in that kind of community, and people have a good time. It's different. The tasting rooms are definitely a great avenue also. People are on vacation, people are enjoying Napa or Sonoma or now Oregon and get a chance to be there and see it. But again, to travel to their towns. So, when somebody has a 10-minute drive home and you have a 10-minute drive back to your hotel where you got to fly home the next day, you've gone out to them and been in their life and supported their local restaurant that they love. So that night, that they were there with a 4-top and 80 other people, 2 months from now, they'll go back and order Silver Oak and Twomey because they remember and want to relive that experience. So it's just been our philosophy, and we are certainly looking for ways to support the restaurant, industry now. And short of, doing the small things we can, we will be right back out there as soon as we all get reopened again and back in business.
Speaking on consumer focus, Ken, congratulations on your publishing of your first book recently, by the way. The Beginner Guide. But could you give us maybe some advice for people looking to get into California wines, Cabernet, or anything else?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one thing I tell people all the time is, start with some benchmark wines. And there's so many that are what I would call, relatively affordable. Don't run out there and grab the, superstar. And don't get me wrong, I love Colgan, I love Bryant, I love all those. They're so expensive. And, my advice is to really get in, if you're going to get into California wine, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet. And those are, really the basics where you want to start. The whole state makes them. Some of them can be very affordable, and you start to figure out your style and your palate, what you like, and what interests you, and take good notes. I mean, that's the key. You got to understand, because your one man's, trash is another man's treasure, right? So you got to figure out what you like. What is it that is exciting to you? I've always been the sommelier. I was like the first sommelier to go to Argentina to make Malbec, right? I love Malbec. I love it. It's so sexy and juicy and delicious. I just love it. I'm a sucker for that. I'm sorry, but
especially down there.
Yeah, exactly. So I've always known what I liked, and I think that's take good notes. That would be my advice. I have a question for Matt. What glass are you using?
The Zalto.
Me too, but yours is, I was like, gosh, that thing's
Yeah,
enormous.
I got the Pinot Zalto was a wedding present.
The Pinot glass.
Fantastic.
I use Pinot glasses for everything, Matt.
That's right. Yeah, I do.
So Chris, we had a question come in about what older vintages we feel are best right now.
Yeah,
and how could we get one?
Talk about that.
Yeah. So we, like I mentioned before, do have wines that we hold, not back to the 70s and 80s for sale for the reasons we talked about, but certainly, some 90s and in the 2000s. So I would encourage I can ask, let's see, I can look. Oh, it went away. I can encourage the person asking the question, to take a look at our website. For my palate and for my, sweet spot, it's kind of 10 years. It's easy to remember, 10 years from the current date. So in 2020, the 2010s are drinking beautifully. And then another 10 years back. So anywhere between 10 and 20-year-old Silver Oak wines, that we would have and we know are sound, are great. Obviously, if you trust a source and somebody's got some older wines too, that's a great source. But the easiest way to build a collection is buy now and hold them. Buy more than you're going to drink in a year, age it, and then buy more next year and the year after. I am a salesman too, but that's how you build a cellar. And that, and then you go in and you pull that last bottle that you forgot about, and it's 8, 10, 12 years old, and it's really a nice experience.
Well, for me, and having shared, plenty of bottles, definitely more than my share with Dad, and out of his cellar, which obviously has the full collection of Silver Oak. The remarkable thing is when you open a vintage that you really didn't expect to hold up as well as it does, and it really surprises you. And so the I think about side by side sort of right now, and I know he's got them in the cellar, so maybe I'll have to sneak in there when he's gone later. But the 97 Alexander Valley and the 98 Alexander Valley, those are beautiful, beautiful wines. Oh, Ken's got one right there.
2007. This is
Nice.
this was my favorite vintage.
Yeah.
In a long time, and I'm waiting. I'm going to open this summer. So I agree with you guys. I mean, it's just right around the 10, 13 year mark, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
That's a 3 liter.
Yep.
So,
Signed.
beautiful size, beautiful format.
Who's signed
Can you
that?
send us your address, Ken? We'll all come over once we can.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this is Bevan. So
Yeah, nice. Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Signed by Dan.
One thing I'd like to ask, we're going to wrap things up in a minute. Don't want to go too long here for everybody. I know it's getting late a little bit here, and for you guys, you have
That's
things
school night.
to see. It's school night, exactly. But I feel like you can't talk about Silver Oak without talking about 2006. So I don't know, Tim, if you want to talk about 2006 and kind of what happened then and kind of fill people in.
Specifically the fire.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we had, the Silver Oak was founded in a dairy barn on the Oakville property where we still are today. We had built buildings and not forgotten about it, but we had expanded beyond it and kept it as kind of a show barrel shay, and had a dumpster, unfortunately, catch on fire, having had some fireplace ashes put in it and some papers put on it later, and that was under the eave of the building. So it was really the milk barn where they stored the milk back in the 40s and 50s on that property, and that shay that had barrels in it that were lost in that fire in 06. But it also was a watershed moment for us and an opportunity, because we had been talking about a single bathroom for the guests, a small kitchen, tastings and tasting room was getting more packed. The production area had been redone and expanded, but still was a little antiquated. So we just took the opportunity, having lost that founding couple of small buildings, not insignificant, but kind of in the big picture, not important, to take all buildings down and just reimagine literally within a couple of weeks of what we needed. We just asked, Daniel Barron at the time, our winemaker and hospitality director, and if you had your choice, oh, I know, no, it's right here. I have a piece of paper. I need more bathrooms. I need a nice kitchen. I need parking in the back. We want to change the flow of the place. So the current Oakville Winery is a testament to that was opened in the fall of 08. And we moved quickly. We had good opportunities. We also opened that place right before the Great Recession, and having opened the Alexander Valley Winery right before the Great Pandemic, we're just going to move on and keep on trucking. But that's what you do in the wine business. It's not about the next quarter. It is for the sales team. Sorry, Matt. But it's not, for an ownership or a vineyard alone. I mean, every time we buy a vineyard, Nate smiles, but it's true. It's 10 years before you sell a bottle of wine. Literally, like the dirt's ready to go. Well, unless the vines are active and if you have to replant it, it takes a full 10 years. So it's a long commitment, a long time, time vision. And we look to the Europeans to get that inspiration of what it really takes generationally to be in the wine business.
Chris, this family is the most resilient group of people I've ever seen, and it started in 2006. So
we were kind of cruising up to that point. It's true.
The Great Recession. We've had a couple wildfires and now closures due to a pandemic, and they just keep on trucking, keep looking through it. Our philosophy now is we're here. How do we come out stronger on the other end? That's always the first thing they say is all right, so we're in the middle of it. What are we going to do to come out stronger on the other side? Absolutely.
That's all you can do, right? Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I can't wait to see you guys again down in Napa when all this is over. I was supposed to be down there in February actually, but had to change my plan.
I was supposed to be in Toronto last weekend.
Yeah, plans change, things happen, but we'll all see each other soon, I'm sure. And Ken, hopefully we'll see you up this way or in Chicago as well. I just want to let everyone know, at least in Ontario, that all the wines that we talked about today, the 2014 vintage of Alex and Napa, as well as some Sauvignon Blanc, some Twomey as well, are all available on halpernwine.com. So check that out. Obviously, you can go to the winery as well if you're south of the border. Check them out on their website. For someone who asked about previous vintages, I know when I went to Alex Valley last year, they were selling 10-year-old. I think it was, I can't remember which year it was. There was a 10-year-old bottle right out of the winery. So if you happen to be down there, it's a good reason to go pick up some older vintages as well. Saturday, for people who want to join, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're welcoming Renzo Cottarella, who's the CEO and head winemaker of Antinori. So
Cool.
1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is going to be a pretty wild time. I'm very excited to chat with him. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for setting this up.
And
Thank you, guys.
Colin, don't know what happened to him, but we'll be in touch.
oh yeah, and sorry about the tech issues as well. Sometimes that happens.
That's right.
Luckily, we don't have one of those embarrassing Zoom pop-ins. This went pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys.
Thanks, Ken. Nice to see you. bud.
Good luck, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank
Thank you.
care.
Stay safe. Thanks,
you.
Ken.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Chris.
guys.
All right. Take care. See
I'm
you.
gonna finish these wines.
Yeah. See you soon, Ken. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.